The whistle cut through the air like a blade, sharp and final, as James Carter stood frozen in the center of the dog show arena. His German shepherd Valor sat rigid at his side, ears pinned back, sensing the storm brewing in the crowd's murmurs. In that moment, Jamisa, black veteran who'd faced gunfire in deserts half a world away, felt a different kind of war zone closing in. It was supposed to be a triumphant day. James had trained Valor for months, their bond forged through sleepless nights and shared scars, both visible and not. The Southeast Regional Dog Show was their chance to prove something to themselves, to the world. James, in his pressed military uniform, had walked into the Georgia fairgrounds with his head high, Valor's leash steady in his hand. The crowd, a mix of families, trainers, and judges, buzzed with anticipation. But as James stepped into the ring for the obedience trial, the air shifted. As lingered too long, whispers grew sharper. And then Judge Harlan Whitmore, a man with a reputation as old and unyielding as the oak trees lining the arena, stepped forward. "You sure you're in the right place, son?" Whitmore's voice was low, coated in false courtesy, but the words landed like a slap. The crowd hushed. James's jaw tightened, his dark eyes locking onto the judge's pale, smug face. Valor growled softly, a warning James felt through the leash. "I'm exactly where I belong," James replied, his voice steady but laced with fire. He'd heard worse in his Lithian, the streets of his hometown, in the barracks where some soldiers thought his skin made him less. But here, in this ring, with Valor's trust anchoring him, he wouldn't back down. Not today. Whitmore's lips curled into a thin smile. "We'll see about that." He turned to the other judges, a trio of older men who exchanged glances that spoke volumes. The trial began, but it was clear from the first command that something was wrong. Every move James and Valor made, every flawless sit, stay, and heel was met with curt nods or outright dismissal. The crowd sensed it too, their murmurs growing into a restless hum. A young girl in the stands, clutching a program, whispered to her mother, "Why are they being so mean to him?" James felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment. He'd faced this before, people who saw his skin before his service, his heart, his humanity. But Valor didn't care about color. Valor saw only loyalty, and James poured every ounce of his into their performance. They moved as one, a dance of trust honed through months of training in the quiet of James's backyard, where no one could judge them but the stars. The final task was a complex sequence, a series of signals James would give Valor without speaking, a test of their unspoken bond. James raised his hand, and Valor snapped to attention, eyes locked on his master. The crowd held its breath as James guided Valor through a flawless routine, zigzagging through cones, retrieving a dumbbell, and returning to a perfect sit. It was poetry in motion, a testament to their partnership. But when James looked to the judges, Whitmore's face was stone. The score came, a 92, respectable but nowhere near the top. The crowd erupted in boos, a rare defiance in the usually polite world of dog shows. "That's robbery," a man shouted from the stands. A woman nearby stood, clapping defiantly, her eyes locked on James. But Whitmore raised a hand, silencing the crowd with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "This is my ring," he said, his voice booming, "and I say that dog and its handler don't belong here." The words hit James like a bullet. He stood tall, but inside he was breaking. Memories flooded back. The taunts in basic training, the accidental shoves in crowded markets, the letters from home that spoke of his sister being turned away from jobs she was overqualified for, all because of the skin they shared. Valor sensed it, pressing closer, his warmth a reminder that James wasn't alone. But the humiliation burned, raw and public, as Whitmore's words echoed across the arena. "You're dismissing us?" James asked, his voice low but carrying a weight that made even Whitmore pause. The other judges shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke. The crowd was a powder keg, some shouting support, others muttering in agreement with Whitmore. A line had been drawn, and James stood on one side, alone but for Valor. "I'm enforcing standards," Whitmore said, his eyes narrowing. This is a prestigious event. Not everyone's cut out for it. The implication hung heavy, unspoken but clear. James's grip on Valor's leash tightened, his knuckles paling. He could walk away, let the sting of this moment fade into the countless others he'd endured. Or he could fight, not with fists, but with the one thing no one could take from him, his truth. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Whitmore. The crowd hushed again, sensing the shift. "You think I don't belong?" James said, his voice rising now, each word a hammer striking steel. "I served this country. I carried men out of fire. I trained this dog to be better than goods exceptional. And you're telling me we don't measure up because of what? Your standards." He spat the last word, and it landed like an accusation. Whitmore's face reddened, but before he could respond, James raised his hand, the same signal he'd used with Valor moments before. But this time it wasn't for the dog. It was for the crowd, for the judges, for every soul watching. A single deliberate gesture. His fist raised, not in anger, but in defiance, in pride. The arena fell silent, the weight of that signal sinking in. It wasn't just emotion. It was a statement, a claim to his place, his worth, his humanity. Valor barked, sharp and clear, as if echoing his master's resolve. The crowd exploded, some in cheers, others in gasps, but none could look away. The other judges scrambled, whispering among themselves, but Whitmore stood frozen, his authority cracking under the weight of James's defiance. What happened next would ripple far beyond that Georgia fairground. A moment that would be recounted in headlines, shared in whispers, and etched into the hearts of those who witnessed it. James Carter, a man who'd faced wars both abroad and at home, had just turned a dog show into a battlefield for justice. And he wasn't done yet. The confrontation didn't end with that signal. Whitmore, recovering his composure, doubled down. "You're out of line," he snapped, stepping closer, his finger jabbing toward James. "You think you can come here, make a scene, and disrespect this institution?" James didn't flinch. "Disrespect?" he said, his voice calm but cutting. "Disrespect is judging a man by his skin instead of his skill. Disrespect is ignoring the truth in front of you because it doesn't fit your world." He gestured to Valor, who sat unwavering, eyes fixed on James. "This dog trusts me. He doesn't care what I look like. Why can't you do the same?" The crowd was no longer a passive audience. People stood, some filming on their phones, others shouting encouragement. A black woman in a bright sundress yelled, "Tell him, brother." A white man in a cowboy hat nodded, his face grim but supportive. The division in the arena was palpable, a microcosm of the world outside, where lines of race and power were drawn in every corner. One of the other judges, a wiry man named Peterson, finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "Harlan, maybe we should reconsider the score. The dog's performance was enough." Whitmore cut him off, his face a mask of fury. "I run this show. My call stands." But his voice wavered, betraying a crack in his certainty. The crowd's unrest was growing, and even he couldn't ignore it forever. James saw his opening. He turned to the crowd, his voice rising to carry over the noise. "This isn't just about me or Valor," he said. "It's about every person who's been told they don't belong, who's been judged before they even had a chance. You see this dog? He's proof that trust and heart matter more than prejudice. And I'm not leaving this ring until you see it too." The words landed like a thunderclap. The crowd roared, a wave of support that shook the arena. Whitmore's face paled, his authority crumbling under the weight of James's truth. The other judges huddled, their whispers frantic now. Peterson stepped forward, his voice stronger this time. "I'm calling for a review," he said, glancing at James with something like respect. "This score needs to be reassessed." Whitmore's eyes blazed, but he was cornered. The crowd's energy, James's defiance, and Valor's unwavering loyalty had shifted the tide. The review was granted, and as the judges conferred, James knelt beside Valor, stroking his fur. "We did good, boy," he whispered. Valor licked his hand, a silent promise that they were in this together. The review took agonizing minutes, the crowd restless, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Peterson stepped forward, holding a new scorecard. After reconsideration, he announced, his voice carrying over the murmurs, James Carter and Valor are awarded a score of 98, a perfect performance. The arena erupted. Cheers, applause, even tears from some who'd felt the weight of James's stand. Whitmore stormed off, his pride wounded, but James didn't care. He looked at Valor, then at the crowd, and felt something he hadn't in years. Hope, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. As he left the ring, a young boy ran up, eyes wide. "Mister, you and your dog were amazing." James smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Thanks, kid. Just remember, don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." The story of that day spread, carried by those who'd witnessed it, amplified by videos shared online. James and Valor became symbols of resilience, of standing tall against hate. But for James, it was simpler. It was about a man and his dog, proving that courage could change hearts, one signal at a time. The cheers still echoed in James Carter's ears as he led Valor out of the arena, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. The score of 98 was a victory, but it wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The crowd's applause followed him, a mix of triumph and unrest, as if they too sensed the deeper battle wasn't over. James's heart pounded, not from the thrill of the win, but from the fire still burning inside him. He'd stood his ground, but the memory of Whitmore's sneer, the sting of those words, "You don't belong," clung to him like smoke. Outside the arena, the Georgia sun beat down, casting long shadows across the fairgrounds. Valor trotted beside him, his tail high, oblivious to the human complexities swirling around them. James's phone buzzed in his pocket, notifications piling up from friends, family, and strangers who'd seen the videos already spreading online. A local news crew hovered nearby, their camera trained on him, but James waved them off. He wasn't ready to talk, not yet. He needed a moment to breathe, to process what had just happened. As he reached the edge of the fairgrounds, a familiar voice called out, "James!" It was Lena, his younger sister, pushing through the crowd. Her eyes were bright with pride, but there was worry there too. She threw her arms around him, Valor nudging her leg in greeting. "I saw it all," she said, her voice thick. "You didn't let them break you." "Almost did," James admitted, his voice low. He glanced back at the arena, where people were still milling about, some casting glances his way. "They tried, Lena. They always try." Lena's face hardened. She'd grown up in the same small town as James, faced the same stairs, the same doors slammed shut because of their skin. "You showed them," she said. "You and Valor. That signal you gave it was like you were speaking for all of us." James nodded, but the weight of her words pressed on him. He hadn't planned to make a stand, not like that. He just wanted to compete, to show what he and Valor could do. But Whitmore's words had lit a fuse, and now the explosion was out of his control. The videos online were gaining traction, comments flooding in, some calling him a hero, others echoing Whitmore's venom, claiming he'd played the race card to win. The truth, as always, was messier. As they walked toward the parking lot, a man approached, middle-aged, white, wearing a polo shirt and a hesitant smile. "Mr. Carter? I'm Tom Reynolds, one of the show organizers. Can we talk?" His tone was polite, but James caught the unease in his eyes, like he was stepping into a minefield. James stopped, Valor sitting alert at his side. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice guarded. Tom cleared his throat. "What happened in there, it's caused a stir. We're getting calls, emails. People are divided. Some say Whitmore was out of line. Others think you provoked him. We'd like you to make a statement. Maybe calm things down." James's eyes narrowed. "Calm things down? You mean cover it up?" No, Tom said quickly, hands raised. "We just want to keep this event about the dogs. Not politics." "Politics?" James's voice was sharp now, cutting through the humid air. That man humiliated me in front of hundreds of people because of who I am. That's not politics. That's hate. And you want me to smooth it over?" Tom flinched, his face reddening. "I'm not saying it was right, but nothing—" Lena cut in, stepping forward. "You think James is the problem here? That judge tried to tear him down, and you're worried about your event's reputation." Tom opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly out of his depth. James put a hand on Lena's arm, calming her. "I'll make a statement," he said, his voice steady but firm. "But it won't be to calm things down. It'll be to tell the truth. You want this to be about the dogs? Fine. But it's also about fairness, about respect. You don't get to pick and choose when that matters." Tom nodded, looking relieved but uneasy. "Fair enough. We'll set up a press area. Whenever you're ready." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I thought you and your dog were incredible out there." James gave a curt nod, and Tom walked away, glancing back once as if unsure what he'd just unleashed. Lena shook her head. "They're scared of you, James. Scared of what you started." "Good," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Maybe they should be." The next hour was a blur. James and Lena found a quiet spot under a sprawling oak tree, where he gave Valor some water and a moment to rest. The dog lay at his feet, eyes half closed but ears alert, as if he knew the fight wasn't over. James's phone kept buzzing texts from old army buddies, a call from his pastor, even a message from a dog trainer who'd been in the crowd, offering support. But it was the social media posts that hit hardest. Some were hateful, calling him an agitator, a troublemaker. Others were raw, heartfelt people sharing their own stories of being judged, dismissed, pushed aside. One post, from a black woman in Chicago, read, "I cried watching you stand up. It's what I wish I'd done 1,000 times." Lena scrolled through her phone, her face a mix of anger and pride. "This is bigger than the dog show now," she said. "People are talking about you, about what happened. It's like you lit a match." James rubbed his temples, the weight of it all pressing down. "I didn't ask for this, Lena. I just wanted to compete." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes the fight finds you." When it was time for the press statement, James felt the eyes of the world on Heimer, at least, the eyes of this small corner of Georgia. The organizers had set up a makeshift podium near the main tent, with a crowd of reporters, onlookers, and a few dog show participants gathered around. Valor sat at James's side, his presence a steady anchor. Lena stood nearby, her expression fierce, ready to back him up. James stepped to the microphone, his military uniform crisp despite the day's heat. The crowd quieted, cameras clicking. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with everything he wanted to say, everything he'd carried for years. "Today," he began, his voice clear and strong, "I came here to show what my dog Valor could do. We trained hard. We earned our place in that ring. But instead of being judged for our work, I was judged for my skin." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. James pressed on. "Judge Whitmore told me I didn't belong. He didn't say it outright, but we all heard it. We all felt it. And I know I'm not the only one who's been told that, in big ways or small. But I'm here to say this. I do belong. Valor belongs. And every person who's ever been pushed down because of who they are, they belong too." He paused, letting the words sink in. A reporter raised a hand, but James wasn't done. "I raised my fist in that ring not to start a fight, but to finish one. To say, I'm here and I'm not invisible. Valor trusted me to lead him today, and I'm asking all of you to trust in something bigger: fairness, respect, the chance to be seen for who you are, not what someone assumes you to be." The crowd erupted in applause, but not everyone joined. Some stood with crossed arms, their faces hard. James saw them, but he also saw the young girl from earlier, the one who'd whispered to her mother, now clapping with tears in her eyes. He saw a black couple in the back, holding hands, nodding like they'd carried the same weight he had. And he saw Valor, looking up at him with unwavering trust. The press conference ended with questions, some supportive, others probing, trying to twist his words into something divisive. James answered each one with the same calm resolve, refusing to let them derail him. When it was over, he and Lena walked back to his truck, Valor trotting proudly beside them. The fairgrounds were quieter now, the day's events winding down, but the air still crackled with tension. As they reached the truck, a woman approached an older black woman with gray hair and a warm smile. She introduced herself as Miss Clara, a retired teacher who'd been in the crowd. "I've lived long enough to see a lot of fights like yours," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What you did today, it matters. Not just for you, but for all of us who've been told we're less." James swallowed hard, the weight of her words hitting deep. "I just did what felt right," he said. "And that's why it matters," Miss Clara replied. "Keep doing what's right, young man. You and that dog of yours are changing things." The drive home was quiet, the Georgia countryside rolling past in a blur of green and gold. Lena scrolled through her phone, reading out comments from the growing online storm. Some called James a hero, others a troublemaker, but the divide only made the truth clearer. What happened today wasn't just about a dog show. It was about a world still grappling with its own flaws. Back home, James sat on his porch, Valor curled up at his feet. The stars were out now, the same ones that had watched him train all those nights. He thought of Whitmore, of the crowd, of the signal he'd given. It wasn't just defiancy, it was a promise to keep fighting. Not with anger, but with truth. He'd shown the world what he and Valor could do, and in doing so, he'd shown himself what he was capable of. The story of James and Valor spread far beyond that day, carried by those who'd seen it, who'd felt it. It sparked conversations in living rooms, on social media, in places where people wrestled with questions of right and wrong, justice and division. What do you think? Where does courage end and conflict begin? And how do we build a world where no one has to raise a fist to be seen?